We generally agree that traits like pity, self-denial, and altruism are the hallmarks of a good person. But imagine for a moment if those virtues were actually symptoms of a deep cultural sickness, an exhaustion that makes us turn against life itself. In 1887, the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche published The Genealogy of Morals. In it, he set out to diagnose this exact illness. To do this, he didn't look to the heavens. He treated human morality like a family tree. A genealogy of morals means digging through the dirt of history and language to uncover where our ideas of good and evil actually came from, rather than accepting them as truth handed down by divine decree. What he found in that dirt is unsettling. Our most deeply held moral values are not eternal facts. They are manufactured weapons, forged in ancient class struggles, and used for centuries to control human behavior. By tracing the analogy of moral terms across different languages, Nietzsche discovered that the original meaning of the word good had nothing to do with being selfless. It was a title created by the ruling class, the aristocrats, the wealthy, and the powerful, simply to describe themselves and their own vital health. This diagram traces how those root concepts split. While the upper path equated good with privilege and strength, the lower path shows the original meaning of bad. In the ancient world, bad didn't carry the moral weight of evil. It just meant the plebeian, the common, the weak, the people who lacked the power to shape society. The ultimate historical embodiment of this master morality was ancient Rome. The Romans valued physical mastery, conquest, and a joyous affirmation of their own strength. They felt they were good because they were powerful. But this system had a natural rival. Existing alongside these warriors was a priestly caste. The priests were focused on introspection and purity, and they lacked the physical power to compete with the aristocratic masters on the battlefield. Because they were physically outmatched, the priests developed a deep, festering hatred for the masters. Nietzsche calls this resentment, a venomous resentment that grows specifically in groups deprived of the ability to take direct, physical action against their oppressors. The priestly class couldn't win with swords. Their physical powerlessness forced them to invent a weapon that targeted the mind. This tension erupted into a massive ideological battle, symbolized by Rome against Judea. It was the clash between physical aristocratic mastery and the ultimate expression of priestly resentment. To defeat Rome, the priestly class initiated what Nietzsche calls the slave revolt in morality. They executed a transvaluation of values. The traits of the powerful, conquest, pride, and ambition, were suddenly declared evil. Meanwhile, the traits of the poor, the sick, and the powerless were elevated to become the only true good. In this ideological workshop, innate weaknesses were given new names and disguised as chosen virtues. Cowardice was rebranded as patience. Inability for revenge became forgiveness. Submitting to enemies became obedience. The weak managed to convince the strong that their very strength was a sin. It was a brilliant, vengeful strategy, effectively hobbling their oppressors from the inside out. This new moral system triumphed, and as it did, it forced human beings into the rigid, oppressive structures of civilized society. Complete peace and strict order became the new rule. But there was a severe physiological problem. Humans had evolved with wild, aggressive, predatory instincts. Now, the new society blocked all external outlets for those drives. Denied an outward release, those aggressive instincts turned backward and inward. Men, trapped in the cage of custom, began to tear at themselves. Nietzsche argues that this exact inward turning of aggression is how the human soul was formed. The internal friction of man attacking his own animal nature created what we now call the bad conscience. Tamed and trapped by civilization, man became his own torture chamber. It introduced a pervasive underlying sickness into the human psyche, the suffering of man from the disease called man. Living with this new internal friction was agonizing. Humanity was suffering, but they didn't know why, and they desperately needed a reason for their pain to make it bearable. Enter the ascetic priest. He steps in to diagnose this misery, telling humanity that they are the cause of their own suffering. They hurt because they are inherently guilty. They are sinners. This animated loop illustrates the psychological trap the priest sets. By framing this guilt as a debt owed to a divine creator, it becomes an infinite, unpayable debt. The punishment can never balance the scale, ensuring the feeling of guilt is permanent. The priest doesn't cure the psychological disease. He intentionally deepens it, utilizing guilt as a leash to police the strong and keep humanity endlessly ashamed of its own natural vitality. For centuries, the priest's meaning-making held us together, but eventually the drive for truth, a virtue the priest himself cultivated, turned against his own religious fabrications. Without those illusions, we are left with the self-hatred but no purpose. This is modern nihilism, what Nietzsche calls a will to nothingness. But because this entire moral framework was manufactured by human beings for political purposes, it is not an absolute law of the universe, and if it was built, it can be dismantled. Nietzsche demands a new direction for the future. He calls for the arrival of a healthy, created spirit capable of conquering this ingrained guilt and destroying the ascetic ideal. By digging up the dark genealogy of our morals, we expose the machinery of our own self-destruction. We are finally equipped to break free from thousands of years of psychological enslavement and say yes to life.